You can be deeply loved and still feel profoundly alone. You can be surrounded by affection, laughter, and warm bodies, and still ache with a kind of emptiness that no one sees, not even you. Because this emptiness doesn't come from the absence of others. It comes from the absence of you, the you abandoned to be chosen, the you silenced to be agreeable, the you edited to be accepted. What most people call love is often just a transaction, an unspoken deal. I'll give you the version of me you want if you give me the illusion that I matter. But illusions are hollow, and that hollowness doesn't go away, it deepens. You wake up one day and realize you've built a relationship on performance, and it's killing you. You ask yourself, why am I still not fulfilled? Because fulfillment doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being known, not your curated mask, not your filtered personality, but the raw, flawed, brilliant truth of who you are beneath the armor. And that's what you've been hiding, not because you're weak, but because you were taught that your truth is too much. Your needs are too needy. Your wounds are inconvenient. Your darkness is dangerous. But here's what they never told you. Your darkness is not the enemy. It is the passage. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. You think your relationships are failing because of the other person. But more often, they're failing because you never brought your full self into them. You brought your conditioning. You brought your fear. You brought the version of love you learned, not the one you needed. So, of course, it feels empty. You can't drink from a cup that was never meant to hold truth. You can't find intimacy where you are not whole. And you cannot be truly seen if you have not yet seen yourself. The psyche, as Jung understood it, is not simple. It is layered, shadowed, fragmented. And if you do not journey into those inner layers, you will keep projecting your unmet needs onto people who were never meant to carry them. You will keep expecting others to save you from your own void, to make you feel chosen when you haven't chosen yourself, to heal what you won't name, to stay when you constantly leave parts of yourself behind. And it will never work, because no one can fill the emptiness that self-abandonment creates. They can distract you from it. They can soothe it for a while. They can even convince you it's gone. But when the noise fades and the mask slips, there it is again, that ache, that echo, that gnawing question. Why do I still feel unseen even when someone says they love me? Because you can only be loved to the depth you're willing to reveal. You can only be met to the degree you've met yourself. And you can only feel full in a relationship when you are not starving for your own presence. So the question is not, why are they not enough? The real question is, where did I lose myself? When did I start believing that I had to be less to be loved more? When did I decide that my truth was a liability instead of a foundation? You see, relationships are mirrors. And what they reflect most clearly is not your partner. It's your own fractures. The way you flinch when someone gets close, not because they're untrustworthy, but because you have forgotten how to trust your own instincts. The way you apologize for existing too loudly, not because you're wrong, but because you learned that your power threatened people who preferred you small. The way you sabotage love the moment it feels safe, not because safety is bad, but because it's foreign. And unfamiliar comfort often feels like danger to a nervous system addicted to chaos. These aren't flaws. They're patterns, unconscious ones. And they run your life until you drag them into the light. You will always feel empty in relationships until you understand this. Love cannot save you from yourself. It can hold you, challenge you, reflect you, but it cannot replace the sacred work of reuniting with the parts of you you disown just to survive. And it's not your fault. We live in a world that teaches performance over presence, persona over authenticity, validation over truth. But Jung didn't believe healing was about perfection. He believed it was about integration, bringing all of who you are, light and shadow, into consciousness. Only then can you love from wholeness. Only then can someone actually see you and stay. So how do you begin? You stop running. You stop running from your aloneness, and you sit with it. Not as a punishment, but as a teacher. Because the loneliness you feel inside the wrong relationship is the part of you calling for reunion with yourself. You listen, not to the noise of dating advice, social media dopamine, or self-help hacks that bypass the soul, but to the quiet whisper underneath all of it. I want to come home to myself. You make space for your shadow. You let the anger speak. You let the grief rise. You stop numbing the ache with other people's bodies. And you start asking, what am I really afraid of? Most people say they fear abandonment. But the real fear is intimacy. Because true intimacy requires exposure, vulnerability, courage, not the kind of courage that chases love, the kind that stops chasing, that stands still long enough to ask, what does it mean to be with someone without losing myself? And that's where the work begins. That's where the work begins. Because until you understand the difference between connection and codependency, you will confuse attention for affection, control for care, and obsession for devotion. And that confusion, it costs you everything. You begin to orbit around others like they are the sun, forgetting that you were born a star yourself. You dim just to make them shine. You shrink just to make them stay. You betray your boundaries, hoping they'll reward your loyalty with love. But love that demands your silence is not love. It is a cage with velvet walls, soft enough to seduce, but strong enough to contain. Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to survive society. But what happens when the mask starts wearing you? What happens when the image you've projected becomes more real than the self you've abandoned? You lose your ability to be touched, because touch without truth feels like invasion. And intimacy without authenticity becomes suffocating. You wonder why your relationships feel distant, even when you are physically close. Because closeness is not measured in inches, it is measured in depth. And if you haven't descended into your own depths, how can you possibly hold someone else in theirs? We fear being too much. But the truth is, no one has ever been too much for the right person. You have only been too much for those committed to staying shallow, for those who were never taught how to swim in emotional oceans, only to float on surface pleasantries. And maybe you've done the same. So now it's time. Time to stop mourning relationships that were never rooted in reality. Time to stop begging for love from people who only knew how to love your performance, never your presence. You want to feel full? Then be brave enough to feel empty first. Because in the silence of your own soul, you will meet the parts of you that don't need fixing, only witnessing. You don't need someone to complete you. You need to reclaim the fragments you gave away, the fragments you scattered in past relationships, the pieces of self-respect you traded for validation, the boundaries you bulldozed just to be touched, the integrity you bartered just to belong. You are not a half. You are not an echo. You are not a question mark waiting to be answered by another person's love. You are the whole damn exclamation. But only if you remember. Because no relationship can hold what you refuse to own. If you hide your needs, they will starve. If you suppress your voice, it will shatter your peace from the inside out. If you dim your light, you will attract people who fear the fire, not those who dance in it. Carl Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And isn't that what we do in love? We fall for the fantasy instead of facing ourselves. We look for rescue instead of reflection. We chase happily ever after instead of asking, am I even living honestly right now? If you want relationships that nourish, not drain you, you must begin where most are too afraid to look. In the mirror. Not the kind that flatters, but the kind that reveals. Not the kind that edits, but the kind that exposes. You don't attract what you deserve. You attract what you are. And if you are still fragmented, still ruled by unresolved pain, you will be drawn to people who mirror your brokenness, not your brilliance. But here's the miracle. That same mirror can become your medicine. The relationship that cracked you open, it wasn't a failure. It was a revelation. It showed you the places that still bleed, the stories that still haunt, the boundaries you never built, the voice you never used. Pain is not punishment. It is the soul's most honest feedback. It says, something here is not aligned with your truth. So listen. Stop silencing the ache. Stop medicating the emptiness with distractions dressed as love. Sit with it. Because when you stop running from your loneliness, it transforms. It stops being a void and becomes a gateway. A gateway to knowing yourself, not through others, but through presence. A gateway to choosing yourself, not because someone else didn't, but because you finally did. And when you do, when you come home to your wholeness, you stop needing people to fill you. You start inviting people who can meet you. Not save you, not fix you, not complete you. Just witness you in your fullness, in your depth, in your darkness, and in your dawn. This is not poetic theory. This is psychological truth. Jungian psychology teaches that wholeness does not come from rejecting the shadow, it comes from integrating it. And until you integrate your shadow, you will project it onto lovers, onto friends, onto anyone who comes close enough to trigger what you have not healed. So how do you break the cycle? You stop assigning others the role of healer. You stop expecting your partner to fix what your childhood fractured. You stop blaming them for your emptiness and start befriending it. Because your emptiness is not a flaw. It's an invitation to excavate the parts of you buried under years of performance, to unearth the child who learned that love must be earned, to rescue the adolescent who decided their needs were a burden, to hold the adult who still fears that real connection is always followed by loss. No one teaches us how to stay when it's hard, how to stay when we're triggered, how to stay when the other person holds a mirror to the wounds we've spent years avoiding. But the work of love, real love, is not in the falling. It's in the staying. Staying with yourself first, and then learning how to stay with another without disappearing. That's what your soul is craving. Not just romance, not just chemistry, but depth, sanctuary, the kind of connection where masks fall and truth rises, where silence isn't avoidance, but reverence, where your presence alone is proof that you no longer abandon yourself to be held. You are not too much. You were just never in the right room. And now it's time to build that room inside of you, a place where every part of your psyche has a seat at the table. The shadow, the child, the warrior, the seeker, the truth teller, the one who finally said, enough, enough, enough with pretending you're fine just because someone stayed. Enough with calling it love when what you're actually doing is emotionally negotiating your right to exist. Enough with smiling through soul-numbing silence just to avoid confrontation. You were not born to be tolerated. You were born to be known, not just touched, not just praised, known. And to be known You have to know yourself first. Not your resume, not your relationship history, not your achievements, but your truth, the beliefs you've swallowed without question, the needs you've buried out of shame, the desires you're afraid to name, the wounds you've disguised as strength. This is where transformation begins, in ruthless inner honesty, not the feel-good bubble bath kind of self-love, but the gritty, tear-stained kind, the kind that forces you to ask, who have I been becoming in order to be loved? And who would I become if I stopped? If you never asked yourself that you've been sleepwalking, moving through relationships like a ghost, looking for a body to haunt, and the tragedy is you keep calling it love. Jung warned us, when the shadow is not integrated, it sabotages. It becomes the hand behind your decisions, the force that keeps you replaying the same story with different names. You keep attracting emotionally unavailable people. It's not because the world is cruel. It's because you are emotionally unavailable to yourself. You keep losing yourself in relationships. It's not because they were too powerful. It's because you surrendered your power before the first kiss. Let's get brutally honest. You can't keep blaming others for patterns you participate in. Healing doesn't begin with being understood. Healing begins when you stop abandoning the parts of yourself you think are unlovable. Do you want to know why it feels so hollow after they leave, or worse, while they stay? Because you handed over your identity like a gift, wrapped in silence, sealed with compliance, and now you're grieving something that was never rooted in truth. You're not heartbroken over the person. You're mourning the parts of yourself you lost while trying to be what they needed. But here's the hidden doorway. That grief, that hollowness is not a curse. It is the compass. It's showing you where you were never free. It's pointing to the boundary you never drew. It's revealing the lie you lived and the truth you're ready to walk into. It hurts because you're finally awake. And waking up is violent at first, like being ripped from the comfort of delusion into the cold clarity of what actually is. But clarity is power, because when you see clearly, you choose consciously. You stop defaulting to survival. You start living in alignment. You stop being magnetized to chaos. You start creating peace that doesn't depend on performance. You stop over-explaining your worth. You start embodying it wordless, grounded, undeniable. This is individuation. The sacred path. Jung mapped out the journey from fragmentation to integration. And it is not a linear walk through light. It is a spiral through shadow. You will lose who you thought you were. You will confront parts of you you swore you buried. You will question the meaning of love, of self, of connection. But one day, without even realizing it, you will sit across from someone who sees you without flinching, who doesn't need you to shrink or shine or shapeshift, because you no longer need that either. And in that moment, you'll feel it. The difference, the shift, the solidity of your own presence. You realize, I am not empty. I was just echoing back the hollowness of who I pretended to be. Now, you speak from substance. Now, your love is not a plea, it is a gift. Now, your boundaries are not walls, they are gateways. Now, your stillness is not silence, it is sovereignty. But this doesn't happen by accident. It happens the moment you say, I will no longer betray myself to be loved. I will no longer call abandonment intimacy. I will no longer romanticize emotional starvation. Because love, true love, starts within. And until you meet yourself at the depths where no one applauds, you will keep begging for what you have the power to give yourself. You are not waiting for someone to choose you. You are remembering that you've always been the one with the key. the one with a voice, the one with a fire, the one who doesn't need to be understood by the world because they finally understand themselves. And from that place, you become magnetic, not to everyone, but to the right ones, the ones who resonate with truth, the ones who are not afraid of your intensity, the ones who meet your depth, not with fear, but with reverence, because you stopped begging for crumbs and started building a feast. You started building a feast, not for others to validate your worth, but for your soul to remember it. Every choice you make now echoes with the sound of someone who has come home, to their body, to their truth, to their voice. You no longer beg to be chosen, because you've chosen yourself in the most sacred way possible, not as a trend, not as a performance, but as a rebirth. And in that rebirth, something remarkable happens. Your emptiness no longer haunts you, because you understand it now. It wasn't emptiness, it was space. Space you never gave yourself permission to occupy. And now you occupy it fully, not with noise, not with desperation, but with presence. You show up. You speak clearly. You don't overstay where you are not seen. You no longer confuse chemistry with connection or control with care. You no longer fall in love with potential, you fall in love with alignment. You don't chase. You attract, not because you manipulate, but because you radiate what you are. Whole, unapologetic, awake. Let others call you too much. Let them say you've changed. Let them walk away from the truth they're not ready to face. Because you are not here to perform your worth. You are here to embody it. This is the root of all secure, sacred connection. When two whole beings meet not to complete each other, but to witness one another. No masks, no games, no seduction through sacrifice. Only presence, only truth, only depth. But to receive that, you must first become it. You must become the safe space you've begged others to create. You must become the love you once made conditional. You must become the fierce protector of your own inner sanctuary. A place where your pain is not denied, but honored, where your story is not erased, but rewritten by you. You'll notice something beautiful once you do this. You no longer attract people who test your worth. You attract those who reflect it. You no longer fear being alone. You revel in your solitude, because your solitude is no longer a prison. It is proof that you'd rather be whole and walking alone than fragmented and surrounded by the wrong kind of closeness. So, stop apologizing for your clarity. Stop minimizing your standards just to be understood. You're not difficult. You just find it difficult to manipulate. You're not cold. You've just stopped melting for people who only came to burn you. You're not bitter. You're just deeply aware of what you will no longer tolerate in the name of love. This is the soul's emancipation. This is how you break the ancestral chain of self-abandonment. Not through rage, but through rootedness. Not through rebellion, but through remembering. Remember this. You are not a lover who was too hard to love. You were a mirror that made them see themselves. You were a storm sent to test the strength of their walls. You were a home they weren't ready to enter. But now finally you've entered your own. Room by room, you've swept the shame out of the corners. You've unlocked doors you once swore would stay shut. You've let the light in, not someone else's spotlight, your own. And with every step you take in this house, you've rebuilt in this inner kingdom of truth. You become the kind of person who doesn't just love, you liberate. Because your presence gives others permission to stop pretending to take off the mask, to bring their shadow into the light, To speak the truth, they thought, would make them unlovable, only to discover this is where love actually begins. And in the end, that's all any of us want. Not the fantasy, not the illusion, but the real, a love that doesn't require you to vanish to be seen. A love that isn't a performance, but a powerful co-creation. But you can't find that until you become it. You can't become it until you return to yourself. And you can't return until you stop running. So let this be the moment you stop. Right here. Right now. Let this be the moment you sit in the silence and hear it. You were never empty. You were just waiting for yourself to arrive. And now you have.